Um, when I was, I told y'all I was in church too, that I've gone to a Methodist church, and since I was a baby, I told you about that in the introductions, and so I was, grew up in church. I was very Christian, and I would go to Sunday school like every Sunday unless I was sick. And we had gone to church one Sunday morning. Usually after church, we would go out to eat at various restaurants in our local town. We'd gone to a place that has steaks, and all of us would get steaks, and we get different things like steaks, either vegetables, and I like to get the sirloin tips with mushroom gravy over mashed potatoes. That was my favorite thing. And I had eaten that before, never had any problems. But this particular Sunday, we had booths. And just so fortunately, I was sitting on the outside of the booth. I was sitting by, I believe I was sitting by my mother, and my brother was sitting by my father. And I was sitting by her, and we were all just talking, laughing, cutting up like usual, and I went to swallow my piece of steak. And they say steak is one of the worst things to choke you, other than like weenies and grapes and nuts, certain things, And all of a sudden, I felt it get lodged in my throat. And I knew I was in trouble. And I just could not do anything. It was like I was paralyzed. Could not even move. I couldn't talk to tell anybody. All of a sudden, it went into darkness. And I felt like my body was slipping away. And then all of a sudden, right before the transition of, and I was in darkness too, and think about, I could still feel the pain. Like I could feel how it was really hurting in my throat, and that steak just didn't want to go down, although I tried to swallow. I didn't even get to cough either. That was the worst part about it. And it just closed my throat up. And I was in that darkness. I could still feel the pain all here, but what the weirdest part is, I couldn't feel, it's like I was paralyzed. I couldn't feel my arms. I couldn't feel my legs. But all of a sudden, I stood up. And to this day, I don't know how I stood up. I think it was my angels, my guardian angels, that actually picked me up and put me in front of the table. And at the time of the transition, when I was in the darkness and I was getting ready to go into the, light, I started to see light. And it was just like light all in front of me, beautiful white light. And I was just so drawn to it. It's like a moth to a fire, or to a light. I was so drawn to it. The pain was gone. And I just wanted to go into that light. And I felt peace and love. It's just like when I received this Holy Spirit, I felt those same feelings. And I just quickly I glanced down, because I felt like my body was just rotating. It was just going up really slow after I started getting in light. And I just happened to look down, and I just faintly saw myself. I had just like leaving my body, and in between where I was in my body, it was like this white looking, like fuzzy looking white and gray stuff between my body and what I think is my spirit was just rising. See, I was already dying. I was going to heaven, and I knew it too. It's like they say, it when you feel it. That's what it is. They have all these things where they talk about, they try to justify it with science, and it's something in your brain that does all this. But I dispute that, because you know what? It's like they say, you are going to know heaven, and you're going to know your maker when you meet him. You're going to know your Father. And that's how I dispute it. They can say whatever they want to, but even at a 12-year-old, guys, I knew it. And and how would a 12-year-old know that? You know what I'm saying? Because the spirit inside of you is oneness with God. He is our creator. We have that connection with us. And he's made of light. We're made of light. It connects us. It is binded to him. And I knew it even at 12 years old. And I mean, it was such an amazing feeling. And like I said, I looked down and I saw that it looked like gray matter separating us. And that was it. I mean, I just went back to looking at the light. I started ascending. I felt myself going upward. And next thing I know, I see clouds. I could see blue skies too, but I mean, beautiful blue skies. But there was white clouds everywhere, just beautiful white clouds. I mean, the clouds here on Earth do not compare to what's there. And there was light shining through them. And the next thing I know, I am grabbed by each one of my arms by both of my guardian angels. I found out that my main archangel, who is my protector of evil, among other things, is Gabriel. And y'all know from the book, you know, from the Bible, that there are 7 archangels in the Bible that's mentioned. And my angel is Archangel Gabriel. And now I know why, because, you know, he's the one that's been helping me to get these things done, you know, throughout my life and through, you know, through the sight now. And then also on the other arm, he was on this side. On the other arm was Gloria, who was a female angel. She was a beautiful angel. He was like, he had kind of darker skin than I had, and he had darker hair. And she was more fair and had blonde, really blonde, beautiful hair. They were in the image as man, but you know what? They had like white robes on, but you couldn't see like no arms or legs. You could just see like a face and the robe just flowing. And it was like we were just floating on the air in these clouds. And like I said, it was so peaceful. And they just guided me. They just guided me in there. And they, you know, we got to a point where we just stopped. And it was like I could look around, and I was looking, you know, taking in the sight, and all of a sudden, I sensed something off to my left, and it was like this bright light. It was brighter than anything else, and I knew instantly that was my Father, my Heavenly Father. I'm so sorry. I get like this every time I tell this. I get like this every time I tell it. Because once you know Him, you always want to be with Him. And as you see, I'm here today because I had to come back. And I'm going to tell you what He told me in just a minute, but pardon me, I'm so sorry. But it's a wonderful thing. Heaven is beautiful, it's wonderful. But among everything, it is Him. I mean, you know your Father. And it's like they say, everyone will bow down to Him. You will, or you'll go to hell. Because, I mean, you want to. I mean, you will, I mean, I love Him. He is the only thing in this world that I can count on. And He will, you know, you can count on Him in heaven. But I could see Him over there, but I could not see like His hands or His feet. It was like the same thing, a beautiful white robe. And you couldn't see His face. It was like beautiful, like a sun just coming out from His face. It was just lit up, going everywhere. And you knew, I mean, you know it's Him. And I didn't get to talk to Him, but it's like we acknowledged each other. And that little bit of time with Him, though, I mean, I'm so thankful for it. And then the next thing I know, I was taken into a room, and it was a big room. I like to describe it as, it had like a big movie theater screen in front of me, but it was all bright light. It was like white. It looked like a scroll, and it was just being unrolled out in front of me. And it started from the beginning of my life, and it goes to the end of my life. It shows my whole life, and it showed things I had done, and it showed things like what I had done, you know, so far to some people, and it showed what I would do to people to hurt people in life. And it and it showed what would happen here towards the end of time. I was shown that I would be involved in the book of Revelations, that there was purposes for me to be served this time during, as the book of Revelations would come about. I knew that, I would be involved. And I looked at all of that as it rolled out in front of me. And then all of a sudden it was like I was placed in another room. They took me to another room. And this was what was the oddest thing, because people don't believe in aliens. And there really aren't aliens. There's just other beings that God has created. And there are good ones and there are bad ones. Just like the fallen angels are bad ones. I was showed two other beings that look like what we have seen portrayed in movies as aliens. There was like a small species, like the Greys, and he was really, although he looked different, he was really pretty. He had weird looking features, but he was pretty. I mean, it's like God says, or Jesus said, they're all precious in His sight, and he was pretty. And he had big eyes, and and he just stared at me, but we could talk telepathically, and I didn't sense anything bad about him. And he was kind of grayish and white in color. And then I looked over to the left. I looked over beside him, and there was another being, and he was a taller being. He was lighter, and he had smaller, more slanted eyes, and he had a smaller head, where the little one had a bigger head. And I was told in God's voice, although he was not in the room, not to be afraid of them, that they were what we were, and not to be afraid of them. But I could talk with them telepathically, like from mind to mind. We could just look at each other and communicate, just like with my angels, just like with God. And and what I realized there too, there is no time. There's no time, other than just like, it is the most peaceful, loving, beautiful place you will ever see. It is paradise. And I was just told, don't be afraid of these beings, that, there are others out there, that we are not his only species, his only creations. And I don't know if these will have something to do with Revelations, or it's just something he wanted me to know. I have not received any discernment on it, but I really haven't asked much about it, because I didn't sense anything bad about them. And then I left that room. They took me out of that room, and then I went back out into the bright light, where God was, I'd say, sitting on the throne. I didn't see the 24 elders or anybody else. I didn't even see any family members. I was never greeted by any family members. I was taken back out there, and what it is, you can't look at God. If you look at God, you have to stay, and you just know not to look. Not to look. Like when I looked over there, I got this feeling, don't look at me, because he was telling me telepathically, because if you look at him, you have to stay. And you know what, I was like in the same spot I was before, and I was feeling like I want to stay though. I was obeying him. I wouldn't look at him, but I wanted to stay. I didn't want to leave this place. I mean, like I said, it's so beautiful and so peaceful and loving. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to come back here. Here is so much heartache and loss and suffering and disease and illness and so much pain and death and despair. And now we have so much evil in this world, and it's just taken over everything. And it, it wasn't that bad back then, but I didn't want to come back. And all of a sudden, he told me I had to come back. I mean, he knew what I was thinking. And he told me I had to come back. He told me I had work to do. And I knew when I looked at that scroll that rolled out in front of me that that's what that was. I knew that's what it was telling me. And he told me as I moved through life, I would remember the things that I had seen on that screen and that rolled out scroll. That it just flashed by so quick, but yet I could keep up with it. And he told me I would remember these things as I go through life, and I would know those are the things that he showed me. And it actually has happened. It happened with, like, the birth of my 2 children. And certain other things, it was like deja vu. You know how we have deja vu? It was like deja vu. And, I didn't want to come back. And I actually argued with him. Thank goodness, he wouldn't let me come back and throw me out like Satan, But he told me, he said, it's not your time. And you have to go back. And I argued with him and I said, no. I don't want to go back. Please don't send me back. I don't want to go back. And he did. And when he spoke to me too during this time, when I tried to argue, he spoke to me in a loud, thunderous voice. And I believe today that this is the same voice that he spoke to Moses when he was on the mountain. That burning bush spoke to him. And it describes in the Bible, this is the same thunderous voice that spoke to him. And, all of a sudden, I had no choice. He just pushed me. He pushed me down with so much force. And I started going down. And I went back down faster than I ever came up. And the next thing I know, it was just like a whirlwind. I was thrust back in my body. And I even saw the darkness as I transitioned and went back into my body. And all of a sudden, I felt my body. I felt the pain. I was weak. I was shaking and trembling. Felt like my legs was going to collapse on me. And I felt like these blows to my back. And the third blow, all of a sudden, the steak just came thrusting out of my mouth, my throat. And it landed on the floor. And I'm just looking around like I'm just so, out of it. I'm like, where am I at? What is going on? And I realized, I'm back in my body. He sent me back. And, excuse me. And he, like he said, he sent me back to do other purposes. And I know that now. And I can respect him for that. And